The woman came down the main street of Julian, California, with 40 bleeding goats and a wagon that looked like it had survived at least 3 different disasters. And she did not so much as glance at the gathering crowd that stopped their business to stare. It was July of 1882, and the gold rush town had seen its share of peculiar arrivals, but nothing quite like this. Amelia Dawson was 24 years old, covered in trail dust, and completely unbothered by the pointing fingers and whispers that followed her procession down the rutted street. Her dark hair had been pulled into a practical braid that hung over one shoulder, and her green eyes surveyed the town with the assessing gaze of someone who had already decided she was staying regardless of what anyone thought about it. The goats, a motley collection of Nubians and Alpines, bleated and scrambled around her wagon, their hooves kicking up small clouds of dust in the afternoon heat. Zane Bradford was leaning against the post outside the general store when he first saw her, and he felt his foreman Charlie nudge him hard in the ribs. "You seeing what I am seeing?" "Unless I am having some kind of heat stroke, yes," Zane replied, straightening up. He was 26, tall and lean from years of working cattle on his family's ranch, just outside of town. His dark hair was perpetually in need of a trim, and his blue eyes had a tendency to take everything in with quiet observation before making judgments. Right now, those eyes were fixed on the woman who had just brought a traveling circus of goats into the middle of Julian. "She is going to lose half those animals by nightfall," Charlie said with certainty. "They will scatter into the hills, and we will be chasing goats for the next week." But the goats stayed remarkably close to the wagon, and as Amelia pulled her tired horses to a stop in front of the land office, she hopped down with practiced ease and began tying lead ropes to several of the more adventurous animals. She moved with efficiency, securing the goats before anyone could say a word about them being loose. Zane found himself walking toward her before he had consciously decided to do so. Charlie followed, along with 2 of the other hands from the Bradford ranch. Young Tommy, who was barely 18 and still thought everything was hilarious, and old Marcus, who had been working cattle since before Zane was born. "Madam," Zane said, tipping his hat, "that is quite an entrance." Amelia turned to look at him, and he saw that her face was sunburned and tired, but her expression was calm. "I did not realize Julian had entrance requirements. Should I have sent ahead for approval?" Tommy snorted with laughter behind Zane, and Zane felt his own mouth quirk up at the corner. "No approval needed, just making an observation." "Well, your observation is noted," Amelia said, turning back to her goats. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have business with the land office." "What are you planning to do with 40 goats in Julian?" Charlie asked, stepping forward. He was older than Zane by a decade, with a weathered face and skeptical eyes that had seen too many foolish ventures fail in the California hills. "That is my concern," Amelia replied, not turning around. "It becomes our concern when your goats end up on our range eating our cattle's grass," Charlie said, his voice taking on an edge. Now Amelia did turn, and her green eyes flashed. "Your range. Last I checked, there was still open land in these hills, and the land office is still selling parcels. Which is why I am here." She gestured to the building behind her. "Now, are you gentlemen going to continue interrogating me, or may I conduct my business?" Zane put a hand on Charlie's arm. "She has a right to buy land if she wants." "Thank you," Amelia said, though her tone suggested she had not needed his defense. She brushed past them and walked into the land office, leaving the 4 men standing in the street with 40 goats. "Well, she is a pleasant one," Charlie muttered. "She is tired," Zane said, watching through the window as Amelia spoke with Mr. Henderson, who ran the land office. "Probably been on the trail for weeks. What is she even going to do? You cannot run cattle with goats, Tommy said, scratching his head. Can you? Goats are for milk and meat, Marcus said in his slow, thoughtful way. And she has got herself some good breeding stock there. Those Nubians are expensive animals. Zane looked at the goats with new appreciation. He did not know much about goats, but Marcus knew animals the way some men knew books. If he said these were valuable, then this woman had not shown up with random livestock. She had shown up with a plan. Amelia emerged from the land office 20 minutes later with a piece of paper in her hand and a satisfied expression on her face. Gentlemen, if you are still standing there watching my animals, you might as well make yourselves useful. I need directions to the western property line at the base of Vulcan Mountain. Charlie's eyebrows shot up. The old Miller place, that land is worthless. Rocky soil, barely any water. Then it is fortunate I did not ask for your assessment of its worth, Amelia said. Just the directions. Zane could not help but grin. She was prickly as a cactus, but there was something admirable about the way she refused to be cowed by their skepticism. Head west on the main road for about 3 miles, then take the North Fork when the road splits. Another mile and you will see the property marker. But madam, Charlie is right about the water situation. That land has only got one spring, and it runs pretty low in summer. Good thing goats do not drink as much as cattle, Amelia said, climbing back onto her wagon seat. Thank you for the directions. And for the record, I know exactly what I bought and what I am doing with it. She clicked to her horses and the wagon lurched forward, goats streaming along beside and behind it like a noisy, bleeding river. The men watched her go, and Zane found himself thinking about that property. He had ridden past it a few times. It was rough land, true, but it was not worthless. The hills there were covered in brush and scrub that goats would thrive on, and if she knew how to manage the water situation, she might actually make something of it. She will be back in town begging for help within a week, Charlie predicted. Maybe, Zane said. But he was not so sure. 3 days later, Zane found himself riding past the old Miller property on his way back from checking fence lines in the high country. He told himself he was just curious, not concerned, but when he crested the ridge and looked down at the small ranch, he pulled his horse to a stop. She had been busy. The old cabin was still standing, and he could see that she had already made repairs to the roof. A new fence surrounded a small paddock area, and the goats were grazing on the hillside above the cabin, spread out in a pattern that suggested they knew what they were doing. As he watched, Amelia emerged from the cabin carrying a bucket, and she walked to where she had set up what looked like a milking station under a makeshift shelter. She was alone. No hired help, no partner, no husband. Just her and 40 goats on a piece of land that everyone in Julian had written off as worthless. Zane found himself riding down the slope before he could question the decision. Amelia looked up at the sound of his horse's hooves, and he saw her hand move to the rifle that was leaning against the cabin wall. She did not pick it up, but the message was clear. Easy, Zane said, raising one hand. Just being neighborly. Are you? Amelia asked, straightening up. She was wearing men's trousers and a work shirt, both dusty and stained. Her braid had come partially undone, and there was a smudge of dirt across her cheek. She looked exhausted and beautiful, and Zane found himself at a loss for words for a moment. Wanted to see how you were settling in, he said, dismounting. That is a good fence you built. Thank you. I built good fences. She studied him for a moment. Did your foreman send you to check when I would be crawling back to town? Charlie has strong opinions, but I make my own decisions about where I ride, Zane said. And no, I came because I remembered there was a problem with the spring here. Wanted to make sure you knew about the blockage up the hill. Amelia's expression shifted slightly. Blockage, Old Man Miller never cleared it out properly. There is a beaver dam about 200 yards upstream from where the spring feeds down. If you clear it, you will get 3 times the water flow. She was quiet for a moment, and Zane could see her reassessing him. Why are you telling me this? Because it is the right thing to do, Zane said simply. You are a neighbor now. We might as well start off on the right foot, even if you did arrive with 40 goats and no apology. The corner of her mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. I was not aware I owed anyone an apology for my livestock choices. You do not, Zane agreed, but you still made quite an impression. Good. I would hate to be forgettable. She set down her bucket and wiped her hands on her trousers. Thank you for the information about the spring. I will clear it tomorrow. It is heavy work. I could bring some men and we could have it cleared in an hour. I can manage. I am sure you can, Zane said, but there is no reason to break your back on it when 4 men could do it faster. Unless you are just determined to refuse help on principle. Amelia crossed her arms. I have learned that help usually comes with strings attached. The only string here is that you are on Bradford Range boundary, and more water for you means the watershed stays healthier for everyone, Zane said. Plus, I admit I am curious about what you are planning to do with all these goats. You want to know if I am going to fail, Amelia said. No, Zane said, and he realized he meant it. I want to know if you are going to succeed, because if you do, it will be the most interesting thing to happen in Julian since the gold started running out. She studied him for a long moment, and Zane had the feeling he was being measured against some internal standard she kept. Finally, she nodded. All right, tomorrow morning, but I will be working alongside you. Would not expect anything else, Zane said. He rode back to the Bradford ranch as the sun was setting, and found himself thinking about Amelia Dawson for the rest of the evening. There was something about her determination, her refusal to be anything other than exactly what she was, that intrigued him. He had known plenty of strong women in his life. His own mother had helped build the Bradford ranch from nothing, working alongside his father until she passed from pneumonia when Zane was 15. But Amelia had a different kind of strength. She was alone, with no family backing her that he could see, and she had still thrown everything into this venture. The next morning, Zane rode out with Charlie, Marcus, and Tommy. Charlie had grumbled about wasting a day on foolishness, but Zane was the boss's son, and that meant his decisions carried weight even if his father was still technically running the ranch. Amelia was already working when they arrived, digging at the blockage with a shovel. She had found the spot Zane mentioned, and she was covered in mud and water. She looked up when she heard them approach, and Zane saw that stubborn tilt to her chin that suggested she was about to refuse their help again. Then she seemed to think better of it and just nodded. There is another shovel in the cabin, she said, and a pickaxe. They worked for 2 hours, clearing out years of accumulated debris, rocks, and the remains of several beaver dams. Marcus discovered that someone, probably Old Man Miller, had tried to divert the water years ago and had only succeeded in creating a silted mess. By the time they finished, all 5 of them were muddy and soaked, but the water was flowing clear and strong down toward Amelia's property. That should triple your water access, Marcus said, wiping his face. Enough for twice the animals you have got now. Thank you, Amelia said, and Zane could hear the genuine gratitude in her voice. I appreciate the help. Now will you tell us what you are planning? Tommy asked, his youthful enthusiasm overriding any sense of propriety. You cannot just make milk with 40 goats. That is too much milk. Amelia smiled, a real smile this time, and Zane felt something shift in his chest. You are right. I am not making milk. Well, not just milk. I am making cheese. Cheese, Charlie repeated, skeptical. Goat cheese, Amelia said. I learned the art from my grandmother in France before she passed. She sent me to America to live with my uncle when I was 16, but I never forgot what she taught me. Goat cheese is a delicacy in Europe, and it is starting to catch on in the eastern cities. There is no one making quality goat cheese anywhere in Southern California. I plan to change that. Zane stared at her. It was brilliant. Julian might be a dying gold town, but it was still on the road between San Diego and the inland territories. Travelers passed through regularly, and there were the ranches, the miners still hoping to strike it rich, and the growing number of settlers in the valleys. If her cheese was good, she would have a market. That is ambitious, Marcus said, and there was approval in his voice. That is insane, Charlie countered. Who is going to buy fancy cheese in a place like Julian? I guess we will find out, Amelia said. Her chin was up again, ready for a fight. I will buy some, Zane said. All eyes turned to him. If it is good, I will buy it for the ranch house. My mother used to talk about the cheese she had back east. I think she would have liked to have had something like that here. Amelia's expression softened. Thank you. Give me 2 weeks to get my operation properly set up, and I will bring you samples. They rode back to the Bradford ranch in thoughtful silence. Tommy was grinning like he had just discovered gold himself. Marcus was nodding to himself the way he did when he was thinking something through, and Charlie was shaking his head. Zane was thinking about Amelia standing in the mud, covered in dirt and water, talking about French cheese with absolute conviction. She is either crazy or brilliant, Charlie said finally. Maybe both, Zane replied. Over the next 2 weeks, Zane found excuses to ride past Amelia's property more often than he probably should have. Each time, he saw progress. She had built a proper milking barn, installed equipment that looked like it had been carefully transported in that battered wagon, and created what appeared to be a cheese-making facility in half of the cabin. The goats were thriving on the hillside brush, and Amelia was always working, moving from task to task with focused efficiency. He stopped to help a few times, showing up with supplies she might need. A load of lumber that the Bradford ranch was not using, some extra tools. She always looked suspicious at first, then grudgingly grateful. Then eventually they would end up working side by side and talking. He learned that she had been living in San Francisco, working in a restaurant and saving every penny. Her uncle had died and left her a small inheritance, just enough to buy the goats and the land. She had no other family in America, no husband, no prospects except what she built with her own hands. Did you never want to marry? Zane asked one afternoon as they were reinforcing the fence around her property. Amelia hammered in a nail before answering. I was engaged once, in San Francisco. He was a shopkeeper, very respectable. Then he found out about my plan to raise goats and make cheese. He said it was unladylike and foolish. He wanted me to give up the idea, sell my goats before I even bought them, and be a proper wife. What did you do? I gave him back his ring and bought 3 more goats with the money I saved on the wedding dress I did not order, Amelia said matter-of-factly. If a man cannot support my dreams, I do not need him, Zane grinned. Fair enough. What about you? Amelia asked, glancing at him. Why is the son of a successful rancher spending his afternoons helping a goat farmer fix fences? Maybe I like goats, Zane said. You like cattle. I have seen your ranch. It is impressive. It is my father's ranch, Zane corrected. And yes, I am proud of it, but I like projects. I like seeing people build something from nothing. It reminds me of why my family came out here in the first place. To get rich in the gold rush. No, we were never miners. My grandfather came out here because he wanted land and freedom. He wanted to build something that was his, where no one could tell him what to do or who to be. I think you would have liked him." Amelia smiled. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was stubborn as hell," Zane said. "My grandmother used to say he would argue with a fence post if he thought it was wrong. Definitely sounds like someone I would like." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and Zane realized he was happier than he had been in months, maybe years. There was something about Amelia's company that felt right, like they were two people who understood each other without needing to explain everything. 2 weeks after they cleared the spring, Amelia rode into town on a horse she had acquired from somewhere, with saddlebags full of carefully wrapped packages. Zane was in the general store when she arrived, and he watched through the window as she tied up her horse and pulled out one of the packages. She walked into the store with her shoulders back and her head high, and the conversations died down as people turned to stare. Julian was still not quite sure what to make of the woman with 40 goats. "Mr. Patterson," Amelia said, approaching the store owner, "I would like to propose a business arrangement." Henry Patterson was a shrewd businessman who had been running the general store for 20 years. He looked at Amelia with interest. "What kind of arrangement?" "I make goat cheese, quality goat cheese. I would like to sell it through your store on consignment. You take a percentage of each sale, and if it does not sell, I take it back with no loss to you." Patterson scratched his chin. "Goat cheese. Cannot say I have ever sold that before. Cannot say anyone has ever offered you a product that people in San Francisco are paying premium prices for," Amelia countered. "But there is a first time for everything. Can I try it first?" Amelia unwrapped one of the packages, revealing a small round of white cheese. She cut a slice with a knife she produced from her pocket and handed it to Patterson. He took it skeptically and popped it into his mouth. Zane watched as the store owner's expression changed from skepticism to surprise to genuine pleasure. Patterson chewed slowly, considering, then nodded. "That is good. That is really good. What else you got?" Amelia's face lit up, and Zane saw the passion that drove her. "I have a plain chèvre, an herbed variety with rosemary and thyme, and I am working on an aged cheese that should be ready in 3 months. Each one is made fresh, using traditional French methods my grandmother taught me." "All right," Patterson said. "I will take a dozen rounds to start. Let us see how they sell." "Thank you," Amelia said, shaking his hand firmly. "You will not regret this." She turned to leave and nearly walked into Zane. "Oh, I did not see you there." "I was just shopping," Zane said, which was only partially true, "but I heard the conversation. Congratulations." "Do not congratulate me until they actually sell," Amelia said, but she was smiling. "They will sell," Zane said with certainty. "And you promised me samples 2 weeks ago. Did I? I must have forgotten." "You did not forget." Amelia laughed, and it was the first time Zane had heard her really laugh. It was a good sound. "No, I did not forget. I have some wrapped for you in my saddlebags. Consider it payment for all the help with the spring and the fences." "You do not owe me anything," Zane said. "Maybe I just want to share my first successful batch with someone who believed I could do it," Amelia said softly. They walked outside together, and she pulled out a carefully wrapped package. "There is the plain, the herbed, and I included a small batch of something experimental. I infused it with lavender. It might be terrible." "I doubt that," Zane said, taking the package. "Thank you." "Thank you," Amelia replied, "for everything." They stood there for a moment, and Zane realized that something had shifted between them over the past 2 weeks. The prickly defensiveness Amelia had arrived with had softened, at least when she was with him, and he found himself looking for excuses to be near her. "Would you like to have dinner at the ranch sometime?" he asked, surprising himself. "My father would like to meet you. He has been hearing about the goat cheese enterprise, and he appreciates people who take risks." Amelia hesitated. I do not want to impose. You would not be. And honestly, my father needs more interesting dinner conversation than Charlie complaining about water rights and Tommy talking about wanting to ride in a rodeo. When, tomorrow night, I can pick you up. I can ride myself, Amelia said. I do not need picking up like some delicate flower. Zane held up his hands. Point taken. Tomorrow at 6. I will be there. Zane rode back to the ranch with the cheese carefully packed in his saddlebags and a strange lightness in his chest. He had not felt this way about a woman since Sarah Turner back when he was 20, and that had ended when she decided she wanted to marry a banker and move to Los Angeles instead of staying in Julian. He had thought at the time that he was heartbroken, but now he realized it had been more bruised pride than actual heartbreak. What he felt when he looked at Amelia was different. It was not just attraction, though she was certainly beautiful in her strong, uncompromising way. It was admiration, fascination, and the sense that he had found someone who matched his own stubborn determination. That evening, the Bradford family sat down to dinner together as they always did. Zane's father, William Bradford, was in his 50s, with gray-streaked hair and the weathered face of a man who had spent his life working the land. Zane's younger sister, Rebecca, was 22 and visiting from Sacramento, where she was teaching school. She was bright and curious and had always been Zane's favorite person to talk to. Zane unwrapped the cheese at dinner and the family tried it together. The response was unanimous. It was delicious. This is remarkable, William said, spreading some of the herbed variety on a piece of bread. Who made this? Amelia Dawson. She is the one who bought the old Miller place, Zane said. She is making goat cheese to sell. Rebecca's eyes lit up. The woman who arrived with 40 goats, I heard about her in town. People say she is either mad or a genius. I vote genius, Zane said. She has been working non-stop for 3 weeks, and she already has Patterson selling her cheese at the general store. William nodded approvingly. That is impressive. It takes courage to start a new venture, especially for a woman alone. She is coming to dinner tomorrow night, Zane said, trying to sound casual. I thought you would like to meet her. Rebecca kicked him under the table and Zane shot her a warning glance. His sister was grinning like she had just won a bet. We would be delighted to meet her, William said. Any neighbor who can make cheese this good is welcome at our table. The next evening, Amelia arrived precisely at 6, riding her horse up to the Bradford ranch house with a confidence that suggested she had not spent even 5 minutes worrying about what to wear or how to act. She had cleaned up, wearing a simple but well-made dress in dark blue, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked beautiful and entirely herself. Zane met her at the door and helped her dismount, even though she clearly did not need help. You found the place all right. It is the largest ranch in the county. I would have had to be blind to miss it, Amelia said, but she was smiling. Dinner was a success. William asked intelligent questions about Amelia's cheese-making process and her business plans. Rebecca wanted to know everything about France and what it was like learning the art from her grandmother. Amelia answered all their questions with enthusiasm, and Zane watched as she gradually relaxed, her natural warmth and humor emerging. My grandmother was a force of nature, Amelia said, laughing at one of Rebecca's questions. She ran her farm alone after my grandfather died, and she refused to let anyone tell her she could not do it. She used to say that goats were smarter than most men and certainly more honest. William laughed. I like her already. She would have liked you too, Amelia said. She respected people who worked hard and did not make excuses. After dinner, Zane walked Amelia out to her horse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the evening air was cooling down from the day's heat. Thank you for inviting me, Amelia said. "Your family is wonderful." "They liked you," Zane said, "though I am not surprised. You are hard not to like once people get past your thorny exterior." "Thorny?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "You arrived in Julian like a fortress. All walls, no doors." "I had to," Amelia said quietly. "When you are a woman alone trying to do something different, people are waiting for you to fail. They want to tell you why you cannot do it, why you should not try. If I showed any weakness, any uncertainty, they would have run me out of town before I unpacked my first goat." Zane nodded. "I understand, but you know you do not have to be a fortress with me, right? I am not waiting for you to fail." Amelia looked at him, and in the fading light her green eyes were soft. "I am beginning to understand that." They stood there for a moment, and Zane felt the air between them charge with something unspoken. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her close and tell her that she was the most remarkable woman he had ever met. But he also sensed that Amelia was not someone to rush, so he just smiled and helped her mount her horse. "Ride safe," he said. "Always do," Amelia replied, and she rode off into the twilight. The next week, something remarkable happened. Amelia's cheese sold out at Patterson's general store in 3 days. Every single round was gone, and people were asking when more would be available. Patterson sent word to Amelia, and she brought another batch, larger this time. That sold out in 2 days. Word spread quickly in a small town. The cowboy hands who had laughed when Amelia arrived with her goats stopped laughing when they tasted her cheese at the bunkhouse. Charlie, who had been the most skeptical, became one of her biggest customers, buying rounds regularly for the ranch. Even old Mrs. Henderson, who had lived in Julian for 40 years and claimed to hate anything newfangled, declared that Amelia's lavender-infused cheese was the best thing she had ever tasted. Zane watched it all unfold with pride and growing affection. He found himself at Amelia's ranch more often, helping with projects and just enjoying her company. They talked while they worked, about everything and nothing. He learned that she loved thunderstorms and hated dishonesty. She loved horses almost as much as her goats, and she had a secret passion for reading novels, which she thought was frivolous but could not give up. She learned that Zane had wanted to be a school teacher when he was younger but had stayed on the ranch because it was the family business. He loved the land and the work, but sometimes he wondered what else he might have done. He was good with numbers and better with people, and he dreamed of expanding the ranch in new directions, maybe breeding horses alongside the cattle. One afternoon in late August, Zane arrived at Amelia's ranch to find her sitting on the cabin steps with her head in her hands. Several goats were milling around her, and one was nudging her shoulder as if trying to comfort her. "Amelia," Zane dismounted quickly and crossed to her. "What is wrong?" She looked up, and he saw that she had been crying. His heart clenched. "I got a letter from San Francisco, from my former fiancé's family. They are threatening to sue me, claiming that some of the money I used to start my business was actually a loan from them. They say I owe them $2,000. Was it a loan?" Zane asked carefully. "No." Amelia stood up, anger flashing through her tears. "His mother gave me $300 as a gift when we got engaged. She said it was for my trousseau. When I gave back the ring and ended the engagement, I sent her a letter asking if she wanted the money returned. She wrote back saying no, that it was a gift regardless of what happened between her son and me. I saved that letter. But now they are claiming it was a loan and they want it back with interest." "You still have her letter?" "Yes, but they are saying that does not matter. They have a lawyer and they are threatening to take me to court. Zane, I do not have $2,000. Everything I have is in this land, my goats and my equipment. If they sue me and win, I will lose everything." Zane felt rage boil up inside him, but he kept his voice calm. They will not win. You have her letter saying it was a gift. That is a legal document. But court costs money. A lawyer costs money. Even if I win, I might lose everything just fighting them. Zane took her hands. Listen to me. You are not going to lose everything. First, we are going to find you a lawyer. Second, we are going to fight this. And third, you are not alone. Do you understand? You are not facing this by yourself. Why do you care so much? Amelia asked, searching his face. Why have you been helping me all this time? Because you are remarkable, Zane said simply. Because you rode into Julian with 40 goats and a dream, and you have worked yourself to exhaustion making that dream real. Because you make cheese that half the town is obsessed with, and because when I am with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. And because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you. Amelia stared at him, her eyes wide. You love me. Yes, Zane said. I know this is terrible timing and you have every right to tell me I am an idiot for saying this now, but yes, I love you, Amelia Dawson. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you refuse to apologize for taking up space in the world. I love that you followed your dream even when everyone told you it was impossible. And I will be damned if I am going to let some vindictive ex-fiancé and his family destroy what you have built. Tears were streaming down Amelia's face again, but she was smiling. You really are an idiot, probably. I love you too, Amelia said. I have been trying not to because it seemed like a distraction, and I could not afford distractions. But every time you showed up to help, every time you believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself, I fell a little more in love with you. Zane pulled her close and kissed her, and it felt like everything he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. She kissed him back fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment, all the problems and threats faded away. There was just the two of them, standing in the California sunshine with 40 goats as witnesses. When they finally pulled apart, Zane rested his forehead against hers. We will figure this out, I promise. Together, Amelia asked, together. The next day, Zane rode into San Diego, which was a full day's journey, to find a lawyer. He found one named Marcus Brennan, who had a reputation for being both honest and fierce. Zane explained the situation, showed him the letter from Amelia's ex-fiancé's mother, and paid a retainer with his own money. This is a straightforward case, Brennan said after reviewing the documents. The letter clearly states it was a gift. They are trying to intimidate her into paying because they think she will not fight back. Tell Miss Dawson that she should expect to receive an official court summons, but not to worry. We will fight this, and we will win. Zane rode back to Julian feeling lighter. When he arrived at Amelia's ranch, he found her in the cheese-making area, working with focused intensity. She looked up when he entered, hope and fear warring in her expression. I found a lawyer, Zane said. He says we will win. Amelia sagged with relief. Thank you. How much do I owe you for the retainer? Nothing. Zane, I cannot let you pay my legal fees. You can and you will. We will argue about it later if you want, but right now, just accept the help. Amelia crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his chest. I do not know what I did to deserve you. You existed, Zane said simply, holding her close. That is all you had to do. The court case took 3 months to wind its way through the system. During that time, Amelia's cheese business continued to grow. She expanded her operation, bought 10 more goats from a breeder in Los Angeles, and started supplying restaurants in San Diego. The money was good, but more importantly, she was building something sustainable. Zane spent as much time at her ranch as his own work allowed. They worked side by side during the days, and in the evenings, They would sit on the cabin steps and talk about the future. Zane told her about his dreams for the Bradford ranch, how he wanted to start breeding horses and diversify beyond just cattle. Amelia told him about wanting to eventually teach other women how to make cheese, to share the knowledge her grandmother had given her. "There are so many women who need a way to support themselves," Amelia said one evening. "Widows, women who never married, women whose husbands cannot or will not support them. If they could learn a trade, they could have independence." "You could start a school," Zane said, "eventually when the business is established enough." "That is a dream for later," Amelia said. "First, I need to win this court case and make sure I still have a business." The case finally went to trial in November. Zane accompanied Amelia to San Diego, along with Marcus Brennan. The courtroom was intimidating with its dark wood and formal atmosphere, but Brennan was confident. The opposing lawyer tried to argue that the letter was not sufficient proof, that Amelia had misled the family, that she was a scheming woman who had taken advantage of their generosity. Brennan tore the arguments apart systematically. He produced Amelia's response letter, showing that she had offered to return the money. He had character witnesses, including Mr. Patterson from the general store and several of Amelia's customers, who testified to her honest business practices and good character. And he read aloud the letter from the ex-fiancée's mother, which was clear and unambiguous in calling the money a gift. The judge took less than an hour to deliberate. He ruled in Amelia's favor completely, dismissed the case, and ordered the other family to pay court costs. As they left the courthouse, Amelia was shaking. "It is over," she said, as if she could not quite believe it. "It is over," Zane confirmed, taking her hand. "You won." They celebrated that night in San Diego before riding back to Julian the next day. Amelia was lighter than Zane had ever seen her. The weight of the threat finally lifted. As they rode, she talked about all the plans she had been afraid to hope for, all the ways she wanted to expand and grow. When they got back to her ranch, Amelia pulled him inside the cabin and kissed him with a passion that left him breathless. "Stay," she said. "I do not want you to leave tonight." "I will stay as long as you want me," Zane said. They made love that night with the gentleness of two people who had found something precious and were determined to cherish it. Afterwards, lying in Amelia's narrow bed with her head on his chest, Zane felt a contentment he had never experienced before. "Marry me," he said into the darkness. Amelia was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? I am not an easy woman. I have a business to run, and I am not going to give it up to be a rancher's wife." "I do not want you to give up anything," Zane said. "I want to build a life with you where we both get to chase our dreams. We will figure out how to make it work. Maybe I spend half my time at your ranch and half at mine. Maybe we build a bigger place that can accommodate both goats and horses. I do not have all the answers, but I know I want to spend my life with you." "Yes," Amelia said. "Yes, I will marry you. But I am keeping my name, at least for business purposes. Amelia Dawson makes cheese. That is my brand now." "I would not dream of trying to change it," Zane said, grinning in the darkness. They were married in January of 1883, in a small ceremony in Julian with Zane's family and half the town in attendance. Amelia wore a simple white dress that Rebecca helped her make, and she carried lavender from her own garden. Zane wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. After the wedding, they settled into a rhythm that worked for both of them. Zane spent mornings working the Bradford ranch with his father and the hands, then afternoons helping Amelia with her expanding cheese operation. They built a larger cabin that could accommodate both of them comfortably, with a proper kitchen for Amelia to experiment with new cheese recipes, and a study where Zane could keep the books for both operations. Amelia's business continued to grow. By the spring, She was supplying 6 restaurants in San Diego and 2 in Los Angeles. She hired her first employee, a widow named Martha who needed work and quickly proved to have a gift for cheese making. Patterson's General Store could barely keep her products in stock. Zane began breeding horses as he had always wanted to, starting with 3 good mares and a stallion he purchased from a breeder in Arizona. The combination of the Bradford cattle operation and Amelia's cheese business made them financially stable in a way that allowed them to take risks and pursue their passions. In June, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. "What if I am terrible at being a mother?" she asked Zane one night. "I am not exactly the nurturing type." "You raise 40 goats and they all adore you," Zane pointed out. "I think you will manage fine with a baby. Goats are easier than babies, maybe. But you are stronger than you think, and you are not doing this alone. We are in this together, remember." Their son was born in February of 1884, a healthy baby with Amelia's green eyes and Zane's dark hair. They named him William, after Zane's father, and called him Will. Amelia took 2 weeks off from the cheese making, which nearly drove her mad with inactivity, and then she was back to work with Will in a sling on her back or sleeping in a basket nearby. "You are going to spoil him, having him around the goats all day," Rebecca said, visiting to meet her new nephew. "He is going to grow up knowing what hard work looks like," Amelia countered. "And besides, the goats are good company." Life settled into a pattern that was busy but satisfying. Will grew into a curious, energetic toddler who loved the goats almost as much as his mother did. Zane's horse breeding operation expanded, and the Bradford Ranch continued to thrive under his and his father's management. Amelia trained 2 more women in cheese making, fulfilling her dream of passing on her knowledge. In 1886, they bought the property adjacent to Amelia's original ranch, doubling their land. They built a proper cheese-making facility, separate from the house, and Amelia officially established the Dawson Cheese Company. The name was Zane's idea, and Amelia agreed because it honored where she had started. Their daughter was born in 1887, a tiny, fierce thing they named Violet, who had her mother's stubbornness from day one. Amelia barely slowed down, working through her pregnancy and returning to the cheese operation within a week of giving birth. "I cannot afford to lose momentum," she explained to Zane, who had learned long ago that arguing with his wife about her work was pointless. By 1890, the Dawson Cheese Company was supplying restaurants and stores throughout Southern California. Amelia had 5 women working for her, all of them learning the art of cheese making and earning money that gave them independence. She had also begun teaching classes, charging a small fee to women who wanted to learn the skill for themselves. Zane's horse breeding had become equally successful. The Bradford Stables, as it was now known, produced horses that were in high demand throughout the region. Zane had a gift for matching horses to riders, and his reputation for honesty and quality spread quickly. One evening in the summer of 1890, Zane and Amelia sat on the porch of their home, watching Will chase the goats and Violet toddle after him. The sun was setting, painting the California hills in shades of gold and amber. "You ever miss France?" Zane asked. "Your grandmother, the life you might have had there." Amelia was quiet for a moment, considering. "I miss my grandmother every day, but this life, here with you and our children, is better than anything I could have imagined in France. My grandmother wanted me to have opportunities, freedom. She sent me to America because she knew I could build something here that I never could have built there. I think she would be proud." "I know she would be," Zane said, taking Amelia's hand. "You arrived in Julian with 40 goats and a dream, and you turned it into an empire." We turned it into an empire, Amelia corrected. I could not have done any of this without you. You believed in me when I was just the crazy woman with the goats. You were never crazy. You were brilliant. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play and the goats graze on the hillside. It was a far cry from the day Amelia had rolled into Julian, defensive and determined, ready to fight the world if necessary. Now she had a home, a family, a thriving business, and a partner who loved her exactly as she was, Charlie, who had mellowed considerably over the years and become one of Amelia's strongest advocates, often told the story of her arrival. She came down that street with 40 goats and no apology, he would say, usually while enjoying a round of Amelia's cheese. We all laughed, thought she was crazy, but we stopped laughing when her cheese sold. Best thing that ever happened to this town, if you ask me. In 1892, when Will was 8 and Violet was 5, Amelia officially opened the Dawson School of Cheesemaking. It was a small building on their property, equipped with everything needed to teach women the art and business of cheese production. Women came from all over California to learn, and many went on to start their own operations. Zane watched his wife teach with the same passion she brought to everything, and he felt proud beyond words. She had not just built a business. She had created opportunities for others, shared her knowledge generously, and proven that a woman could succeed on her own terms. Their third child, a son they named James, was born in 1893. By this time, the routine of balancing family and business was well established, and James grew up in the same environment as his siblings, surrounded by goats and cheese-making and parents who showed them every day what it meant to work hard and love deeply. As the century drew to a close, Zane and Amelia found themselves looking back with satisfaction and forward with excitement. Will was showing an interest in both the ranch and the cheese business, talking about ways to combine the two. Violet was fascinated by the goats and had already declared she was going to be a cheese maker like her mother. James was still too young to show clear preferences, but he loved following his father around the stables. One evening in 1899, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Zane and Amelia rode out to the spot where they had first cleared the spring together. It was a place they returned to often, a reminder of where their partnership had begun. "You remember what you said to me that day?" Amelia asked, dismounting and walking to where the water flowed clear and strong. "I said a lot of things. You said help did not come with strings attached, that you just wanted to be a good neighbor." "I lied," Zane admitted with a grin. "There were definitely strings. I wanted to get to know you better." "I suspected as much," Amelia said, laughing. She turned to face him, her green eyes still as bright and fierce as the day she had arrived in Julian. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was determined to do everything alone." "Thank you for letting me in," Zane said, "for trusting me enough to be your partner." "Best decision I ever made," Amelia said. "Well, second best. The first best was buying those 40 goats." "Of course it was," Zane said, pulling her close and kissing her. After all these years, she still made his heart race the way she had that first day. They stood there by the spring as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was richer than either had dreamed possible. Behind them, their children were growing up strong and confident. Their businesses were thriving, and the town of Julian had been transformed by the woman who arrived with 40 goats and no apology. In 1903, when Zane was 47 and Amelia was 45, they took a trip back to France. Amelia wanted to visit her grandmother's grave and show Zane where she had learned the art that had changed her life. They spent 2 months traveling, visiting cheesemakers, exploring the countryside, and falling in love with each other all over again. When they returned to Julian, they brought new ideas and techniques that Amelia incorporated into her teaching. The Dawson School of cheese making became even more renowned, and women traveled from as far as Colorado and Oregon to learn from Amelia. Will, now 19, took over more responsibility for the day-to-day operations of both the ranch and the cheese business. He had his father's calm competence and his mother's determination, and Zane and Amelia trusted him completely. Violet, at 16, was already an accomplished cheesemaker and was talking about going to college to study business, wanting to expand the company even further. James, at 10, was happiest with the horses and showed every sign of following in his father's footsteps. As they grew older, Zane and Amelia found themselves with more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would ride out into the hills together, visit San Diego for the theater, or sit on their porch and watch the goats graze while they talked about everything and nothing. "Do you have any regrets?" Amelia asked Zane one afternoon in 1910. They were in their 50s now, their hair showing gray, their faces lined with years of hard work and laughter. "Not a single one," Zane said without hesitation. "You? Only that I did not meet you sooner," Amelia said. "But then again, I needed to become who I was before I could appreciate who you are. We found each other at exactly the right time," Zane said, "when we were both ready to build something together." By 1915, the Dawson Cheese Company had expanded beyond California, shipping to markets in Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. Will had married a woman named Sarah who shared his passion for ranching and business, and they had given Zane and Amelia 2 grandchildren. Violet had indeed gone to college, one of the first women in the region to do so, and had returned with ideas for expanding the cheese-making school into a full business academy for women. James was running the horse breeding operation with skill and innovation that impressed even Zane. Zane's father, William, had passed peacefully in 1908, content in the knowledge that his son and daughter-in-law had built something even greater than he had imagined. Rebecca, still teaching, visited often and took great pride in her nieces and nephews. In the summer of 1920, Julian threw a celebration for Amelia and Zane's 37th wedding anniversary. The whole town turned out, including many of the women who had learned cheese making from Amelia and gone on to start their own successful businesses. There were speeches and toasts, and Charlie, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, told the story one more time about the day Amelia arrived. "She came down that street with 40 goats and no apology," he said, and everyone laughed because they all knew the story by heart. "We thought she was mad, but she showed us all. She built an empire on goat cheese and determination, and she made Julian famous in the process. Best thing that ever happened to this town." Amelia stood to speak, and the crowd quieted. "When I came to Julian 38 years ago, I was alone and scared, though I would never have admitted it. I had a dream and 40 goats, and I had no idea if I could make it work. But this town, and especially this man," she gestured to Zane, "gave me the chance to find out. You did not make it easy, but you made it possible, and for that, I am eternally grateful." She turned to Zane. "And you, my love, you saw me when everyone else just saw a crazy woman with too many goats. You believed in me, supported me, loved me, and built a life with me that has been better than anything I could have imagined. Thank you for every single day of these 37 years." Zane stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her to the cheers and applause of the entire town. 37 years down," he said. "Many more to go." And there were many more years, filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with continued success in both the cheese business and the ranch, with quiet evenings on the porch and adventures into the hills they both loved. They watched their children succeed and their legacy grow, and through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, two stubborn souls who had found each other and refused to let go. Amelia never did apologize for those 40 goats. She did not need to. They had been the beginning of everything good in her life, and she remained grateful to every single one until the day she died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, with Zane holding her hand. Zane followed her 4 years later, at 91, having spent every day of those 4 years telling anyone who would listen about the remarkable woman who had ridden into Julian with 40 goats and changed his life forever. Their graves were side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a view of the cheese-making facility and the horse stables and the rolling California hills where goats still grazed. The headstone was simple: Amelia and Zane Bradford, partners in life, love, and 40 goats. The Dawson Cheese Company continued for generations, run by their descendants who never forgot the story of how it all began. The cheese-making school evolved into a full business college for women, helping thousands achieve the independence and success that Amelia had fought so hard to attain. And in Julian, California, the story was told and retold, becoming legend. The story of the woman who arrived with 40 goats and no apology, and the cowboy who stopped laughing long enough to fall in love with her. It was a story about courage and determination, about building something from nothing, about finding partnership when you least expected it. But most of all, it was a love story. A love story that began with goats and cheese and stubbornness, and ended with a legacy that would last forever.